Hey there everybody. So the topic of today's video is going to be about flat tires and specifically how to avoid flat tires if at all possible. It's kind of a common thing when a lot of folks will get a flat, fix it, throw a tube in, maybe on the side of the road, and a couple miles up the road they'll get another flat, or put another tube in, get another flat a few days later. So I'm going to go over 10 different tips that are going to kind of address some of the issues that can happen sometimes with repairing a tube and maybe missing something, or just trying to avoid flats altogether in the first place there. So anyway, I'm going to replace the tire on this wheel, so we'll do a little tire tube flat changing tutorial here in just a bit, but before we get into that, we're going to get into the kind of these list of 10 different tips for avoiding flat tires. So tip number 1 is get good tires, or get the right tires for the job or the type of riding you're going to be doing. I like the AW series of the Bontrager's, particularly the AW3 hard case tires for just getting miles or winter riding. Another good option are the gator skin, the Continental gator skins, and the gator skin hard shell. Great tires for not getting flat tires. They're a little heavier than some of the other higher performance tires, but if you're not really worried about speed and things like that as much as not getting flats, that's a great option. The Continental Grand Prix 4 Season's a great tire as well. Anyway, tip number 2, always check those the rim tape there, the rim strips. Those really common for that to slide over. That little bit of a exposure there, that tube will push through that little hole and pull right through there. Same thing with these used to be common back in the day, these old Mavic plastic strips. You'll get little cracks in them, but these are all things it's hardly noticed sometimes, but that's, if you're getting holes on the bottom of your tubes, that's a good indicator there. Number 3, the tubes that are in your seat bag when you use for spares, if you've had really good luck and haven't had a flat tire for more than 6 months or so, then you might want to double check that tube every so often. Just pull it out and inspect it. Sometimes with them being all coiled up in there, they can get little holes rubbed in them or whatever. Sometimes I like to put them in a baggie like this with some powder them up, and that seems to help. But if it's more than 6 months or so, you may want to replace that thing. Let's see, number 4, you got the sometimes the valve stem, when you're putting a new tube in, that the little part where the valve stem butts into the tube there will get caught up underneath the bead of the tire. This is a super common mistake. So I always like to just be able to, if you can't push that valve stem up and down easily like that, make sure that edge of the tube's not caught up under the tire. Number 5 is just little pieces of debris, little goat head or thorn. I mean, this is pretty well, probably most people do this, feel inside of there, but you'd be surprised how many times it just gets passed over. But can't really see it well from the outside. I went ahead and marked it with a little silver Sharpie. But basically, sometimes you can grab a hold of it with like some tweezers or needle nose pliers, or sometimes I like to just push it through with a pick, or you can do it with a safety pin or whatever sometimes, and just push it right on through. So kind of goes along the same thing with the cut tire. This is the same tip. If you can push on the hole there and see your finger through it, you need to put a boot or something on there for temporarily get you home or whatever. But really, if you get a tire that's cut this bad, you just need to replace it, because it's eventually just going to start to separate. So as far as the different flats with different kinds of punctures, you may be just riding along and find your tires starting to go low over time. So that's going to be like a small puncture or something. But if you're come out to see your bike or whatever, you're riding along and you hear the air actually whoosh out pretty quick, that's going to be indicative of maybe a failure underneath on the rim tape, or a cut or something, or even hitting something and snake biting the tube. So the slow leak type are going to be a little more difficult to find or pinpoint where the hole is, but yeah, hopefully this video will help with that.
Number 6, always check those tires for wear. This is one of on my personal bike, had a little wear spot, but this is a little section of a sample of tire. But you know, these they'll go so far, and then they'll just wear through the cords, and then eventually that tube's just gonna blow right through there. Yeah, so always just inspect your tires. Number 7, always take the smooth line or the good line on the street. In between those 2 yellow lines, that's mainly where the car tires drive, so there's not going to be as much debris there. Where the 2 red squiggly lines are, that's where you're going to find the most debris. They're in the gutter and then right in the center. Number 8, tire pressure. Make sure you keep the correct pressure. That was a little snake bite there, and then also you'll see sometimes a little rubbing on the side. But what happens, you hit the edge of a pothole or just an expansion joint in the street, in that tube. But what'll happen is it'll push between the rim there and the object and put 2 little holes there in your tube there. So always make sure you got good pressure. Let's see here. Number 9, don't ride in the grass. You get on these little bike trails and things like that. This one in particular was notorious for having goat heads and things. It's kind of a sandy soil and next to a river. Always goat heads in that kind of that rural natural grass or whatever. So just don't ride next to it, or don't ride in it for sure. Let's see here. Number 10, if you ride through something questionable, just rub those tires off. Scrub them off while you're riding. If you're not comfortable doing that, you might get off and just scrub them off. But I like to just do it while I'm riding. So if you don't have gloves on, you can use your water bottle. But yeah, you always want to just scrub those tires there. Okay, so this is just a little bonus tip, and that would be tubeless tires. This is one of the Continental Grand Prix 5000 tubeless tires that I got my hands on the other day and got to mess around with. Put it on some rims. It's easy to get on. Seems to be a pretty solid tire, but I've yet to actually have any experience with one. But overall, I'm still not 100% sold on road tubeless tires. Everything else seems to be fine. But anyway, one little tip I do on my commuter bike, I just most tubes these days have the removable valve core, so I just squirt the tubeless sealant directly into in my tubes there, and that's actually worked pretty well. The thing with tubeless, if you do get a flat, it's kind of a major hassle to switch out there on the side of the road. So I don't know, just one little other option. I like the Bontrager TLR. It's got little particulates there in the sealant. But anyway, that's another option.
All right, so a little quick tire changing, tube changing tutorial. This tire's worn out. It's got a few spots here where you can kind of start to see the cords starting to wear through the outer rubber there. So once you get past those cords, it's pretty much guaranteed a flat, explosive flat possibly. Anyway, first things first, we're just going to drop her down into the smallest cog here. You need to undo your quick release lever. We'll go ahead and do that. If you want, without having to touch any of the grungy stuff there, just pull your derailleur back. And normally you can get that wheel out without any having to touch any of the greasy stuff there. Alright, so got our wheel off here, and one thing kind of worth mentioning before we get started, that I've got the label of the tire lined up with the valve stem, and it's always a good idea to do that, not only just because I think it looks cleaner, looks a little more pro, but also if you get a puncture somewhere, you can inflate your tube and pinpoint the exact location just by lining the hole up with the tube with your tire, in relation to the valve stem to label. It's easy to, you don't have to do a lot of detective work sometimes that way. Alright, so got our air all out, and so this is typically where you're going to be at once you've got a flat. What you want to do first is just break the bead loose from everywhere, both sides. You know, sometimes the bead of the tire will want to stick and engage into the rim there. So once you have that all the way loose, at this point it's fairly easy to, you know, if you can, you know, rims that have a fairly deep internal section, you can squeeze one end of the tire, kind of push it in that way, and pull up on the other end. You know, another way is just to put your weight, push down, and then it'll kind of sag there at the bottom. But just by doing this, you know, we've got a little gap here. And normally I can actually just undo that without any tools, but in this case we take our little tire tool there and I've got it hooked under the bead, so just push that way with the rim and pull back on your tool. Got your tire unseated. And once you get your tube out, at this point if you're out on the road, it's kind of difficult unless you have a little mini pump or something with you to inflate it enough to see where the hole is. But you can do that, match it up with your tire, and if there's a piece of debris or whatever in the tire, you can a little easier to locate it at that time. You know, otherwise you just want to run your fingers along inside the rim. Make sure there's no debris. You know, another little tip on the tube, if you do find you inflate it there, you're at home or wherever, somewhere where you have access to a way to inflate that. If you want to waste the CO2, whatever, that's up to you. But basically what you'll do is inflate the tube, maybe twice this size, and you can kind of feel where there's air leaking out. And if you find a spot where it's leaking, don't always just assume that's, if you maybe start at the valve stem and then go all the way around, sometimes there's more than one hole, which I kind of found that out a while back, or just, it's kind of the same thing with just if you're feeling inside the tire, always go all the way around. Don't just, find something, oh, that's what caused it, and assume that was the only thing. So ditch that tire. Another thing is just to the actual rim tape there. Just want to make sure that's in good shape. A couple ways you can do it. You can put the tire directly on the rim first, or if it's a wire bead, or sometimes I'll just put the tube directly into the tire itself there. But we'll go ahead and just stick this one on the rim. As far as our tube, we want to go ahead and inflate this thing. If you're out on the road, you can actually, it's a Presta valve like this. You can, with that thing loosened up, you can actually blow in it without using any kind of device and get it just toward you got the tube holding its shape there. That's one mistake a lot of folks make, is they'll just try to put the tube in totally deflated there. You always want to make sure you got the tire. Normally you can kind of look at just the kind of little chevrons there. They're always going to point forward, but make sure you get your rotation correct there. So we've got our direction correct. Got our valve stem hole right there. Get the old label lined up. We're going to work one bead of the tire on. This is I think that's a 60 millimeter valve stem length, which you want to get the right length for your, your rim depth there. just as a make sure the tube's not bunched up anywhere, and at this point you'll want to just work the tube where it's all the way down into the rim. And I usually, with the standard clincher wheel with the tube in it, here's your valve stem. I like to start about 90 degrees off, because that's where we're going to finish. And just, if you just, the leading hand, try to roll the tire up and over, and then with your thumb, you can just push it up and around. Okay, so we're back here. You know, essentially you want to kind of finish somewhere not on it with the tube in it. You want to finish somewhere not really near the tube itself. Maybe, you know, not opposite either, because you want to be able to get maximum tire inside of the rim there to finish up the last difficult part there. So, you know, a lot of people will use tire tools or whatever to get this last bit on there, but that's an area where you can definitely pinch that tube in there if you're not careful. But if you just, you know, roll it up and over, push over, it's not, you know, this one's not a super tight tire. Some are a little tighter, but you know, if you practice with that method, there's not really many tires that are too difficult to just roll on by hand there, other than some tubeless tires. So we got our everything on. One thing, you know, another common error is getting the edge of where the valve stem connects to the tube, getting that caught up in between the bead of the tire. So you want to be able to move this in and out freely. If you can't move that up and down like that, then you need to make sure, you know, just get that tube out from underneath the edge of the tire there. So we're ready to air it up from here. Just make sure you're all the way on both sides. You know, if you're inflating with a CO2 dispenser on the side of the road, usually I'll bump it a couple times, get maybe what feels like 40-50 psi in it, and then just take a quick look around. Make sure your tire's starting to seat, you know, like you don't have part of the tire wanting to pop off because you didn't have it quite on there all the way. So once you know, look at it, inspect it, you know, you can spin your wheel around, make sure there's no big hops or anything, then go ahead and finish inflating it from there. Alright, so we got it all the way on here and everything. Looks good. About to put it back on the bike. And one other little trick, if you got carbon rims like this, you know, you may notice, you know, sometimes you hit bumps and things that can smack around and make some noise. One quick little bonus tip, take a little strip of a piece of electrical tape and just pierce the top of the press the valve there. Stick the tape down. You know, the black rim, you can't even hardly notice it, and it takes care of that noise there. So, all right, so we're about to put our wheel back on, and I think what we'll do is simulate this as if we were out on the road. So if there's something nearby that you can, you know, a tree or a fence or something, you can just hook your seat on it like that and do whatever. Or, you know, somebody's there with you that can hold your bike momentarily, or you can lay it down on the side opposite of the derailleur. Just be real careful not to lose your chain. Can fall off the chain ring pretty easily like that. So kind of just focus on getting the first cog position, since, you know, we had shifted it down into our first gear. You want to get that first cog in and right under this area here. Sometimes if there's a little push on the tab there of the back end of the derailleur, you can just set it right down on it. Normally just weight of the bike will push it right on there. Usually I like to do is just put a little pressure on the seat and make sure that wheel's all the way up into your dropouts there. Flip your quick release skewer down, and I like to put it in this position here, facing inwards. That's kind of the safest position as far as if a wheel gets up in behind you, it can't accidentally knock that skewer loose there. Alright, so we've got our wheel in place. All we got to do now is, if you're going to do the brakes, you want to flip that close, and then you want to shift her up into a little bit easier gear there. It's easier to take off. And that's it. Make sure your brake pads are double checked. Make sure your brake pads are good. You know, give it a quick double check. Make sure your tube's not bulging out anywhere. There's a cut where it's coming through or anything like that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Hopefully the video was helpful. Feel free to comment. You generally always reply. But anyway, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.